What is sustainable travel anyway? That might be a question that some of us are asking ourselves. But Randy Durband, CEO of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, or GSTC, will be talking about the process of defining sustainable accommodations. He'll talk about the standards for green lodges and tourism practices and how they became what they are today. He'll talk about the impact that one traveler has on an environment or local community. He'll also talk about what travel may look like in the next 10 to 20 years. If you have questions for Randy, remember you can ask them in the chat window or you can tweet at us at hashtag ITMSummit17. Randy Durband has had 2 careers in travel and tourism. The first included 20 plus years in senior leadership positions at some of the finest U.S. tour operators. Following that, in his second travel and tourism career, Randy advanced the work of sustainable tourism as an advisor, consultant, and speaker. He brings his knowledge of the business of travel, his global network of travel professionals, and a passion for sustainability to support the GSTC and the general sustainable tourism movement.
All right. Randy, I am so excited to have you here at the summit. Welcome. And you have so much information to share with us about sustainable travel and ways that travelers can limit their impact on environments and on communities and how they can make better decisions when they're traveling. And so welcome. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Nice to be here. Happy to be with you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I'd like to start with the question of what does sustainable travel mean to you?
Okay. Well, that's a big question. First of all, I don't know that there is any sustainable travel. At GSTC, we use the term sustainable travel to refer to the fact that we're all on a journey towards greater sustainability. And I'd like to start by stepping even outside of travel and think about sustainability in general. If people ask me, why should we travel sustainably, my answer always starts with, because everything we do as individuals and organizations must be sustainable. The planet is in peril. Populations are soaring. Nobody in the world wants to talk about the soaring population, which is a contributory cause to so many of our problems in terms of the present and the future state of the planet and the environment. But the problem could get worse, and climate change is real. But so many other things beyond climate change, just degradation of systems in general, and quality of life, preserving the world that's been given to us. These are critical issues that all of society, all governments, all individuals need to do better on. So I got personally involved in the sustainable tourism movement because I've devoted my life professionally to work in travel and tourism, and I feel a responsibility just as a citizen of the planet to work on the area where I have some expertise. And so I think that's a starting point for all of us, is that we need to work on sustainability in all facets of our life, and that has to be done by all individuals and all organizations. So the goal in travel and tourism, to me, is make it as sustainable as we possibly can, as quickly as we can, and not just work on one or two little pet things, but look at the scope and totality of sustainability. And the reason I work for GSTC is because I believe that the GSTC criteria, which serve as global baseline standards for sustainability in travel and tourism, are really an excellent definition for sustainability in travel and tourism that's complete and shows the breadth and depth of the sustainability issues. I get rather annoyed when I hear a company that does one or two things nicely and pats themselves on the back for being so sustainable, but then in many other facets of what we consider sustainable, they neglect or do poorly on. So what we all need to do is look at that breadth and depth of issues and components of sustainability and do our best to improve across all of them. So that's what I think of as sustainable travel. We're not even close to being there, and we all need to work immediately and more dramatically and more committed to learning and being aware of what are the issues, and then addressing how we can all behave better as travelers and how we can influence travel providers to provide more access to more sustainable products and services.
Excellent. And so today, many viewers might be learning for the first time how to start making these decisions. Some of us might have been, conscious of this for a long time and are interested in learning more. And so this is a great start for a lot of us. Excellent. Speaking of starting from the beginning, I am curious to learn a little bit more about sustainable travel's history. When did it really get started, and how has it evolved in the last few 20, 30 years?
Okay, good. Well, I think the discussion intellectually and in terms of society about sustainable travel really began with the ecotourism movement. The term ecotourism was first used in 1983 and started gaining some prominence in 1990 with the development of the International Ecotourism Society and the development of eco-lodges in Peninsula and Costa Rica. And in the early days of that, ecotourism, the term applied to a more broad discussion of what we now call sustainable travel or sustainable or responsible travel and tourism. Whereas today, now that we've had 5 years of a broader discussion on sustainable travel and sustainable tourism, that ecotourism it's the definition and use of that term has narrowed to talking about a type of tourism that is nature-based, that is highly sustainable, that really speaks to principles that have been developed by a real community of academics and practitioners that practice something that you could call ecotourism. Whereas the concept of sustainable travel or responsible travel, which by the way to me are the same things, what we found is that sustainable travel, the term, does not resonate in the marketplace at all. When there's been attempts to sell sustainable travel by very savvy marketers, they've pretty much all failed. So I like to think of the term sustainable travel as for us to really speak more as kind of professionals and people really focused on the issues. But when it comes to marketing, it's completely failed. We had to talk about components of sustainability that might resonate with travelers. Responsible gets closer to behavior, but I think in terms of specific travel products, they need to talk more about actual attributes and authenticity and up-close connection with people and culture and so forth. So now sustainable travel is this umbrella term, and to me it's a journey to get to sustainability, and there's I can't point to any product in the world that is really sustainable. There aren't truly sustainable travel products or services. There are many that are doing far better than others on that journey, but we've got some distance to cover, especially when you start. The starting point of all these discussions, by the way, is usually carbon emissions. But then we need to go beyond carbon emissions to talk about a range of other issues on fresh water scarcity, on labor issues, on trafficking, of other social issues, and cultural preservation, and that myriad set of concepts that you can read about in the GSTC criteria or elsewhere. So, in terms of where we've gone as a movement, we've raised some awareness, but we're not doing very well in terms of broad application and broad awareness of what needs to be done.
Okay. And so kind of speaking to the fact that, why sustainable travel, responsible travel, eco-travel, why all of those have come about, could you speak to the fact a little bit about what mass tourism has done to communities and why there's a need to be sustainable?
Mm-hmm. Well, mass travel has developed without, I think, proper planning in many places in the world. Destinations are typically not managed with good visitor flow because destinations are typically put their resources into promotion to get more visitors to come, to gain to maximize the economic benefit of more people. And there's very little awareness throughout the world in government that visitation needs to be managed. I've worked in tourism now for 32 years in travel and tourism, and throughout my career, I've always found that people outside of tourism think tourism is easy. It just sort of happens. There's no planning. And because of that, there's not much planning. Governments don't get it. So governments put money into promotion, but they've put, in general, there are many exceptions, but in general, governments around the world, either municipal level, state or province, or national level, whatever level, they've not put resources into something that they're not even aware exists. And that is a body of thought called visitor management, where you look at the visitor experience, how it relates to the residents' quality of life, how you measure visitor satisfaction to find trends, and you could spot problems early in terms of what the visitors are liking or not liking. That whole body of thought is entirely in short supply and short application in the world. So when you read about it, you can start reading some case studies of the relatively small set of destinations in the world that get that. But that's entirely too new. I mean, destination after destination has started in the past 5 years to say, oh, we're going to work more now on quality of visitors instead of quantity. That's a new discussion. Why weren't they thinking and talking along this 20 years ago? It's because they didn't foresee where we were going. They were missing the mega trends of the explosive growth of middle classes from China and elsewhere, and human population growth. We're at 7.3 billion people on the planet. Far more of them have disposable income now to be able to travel. People didn't plan for that. They didn't see the mega trend of home sharing that has brought in huge issues in certain urban settings very suddenly, just in the last 5 years, the massive growth. So because they weren't planning and focused on those things, a long-term mega trend like the population growth, which was obvious to everybody for decades that this was coming, was missed. And then because they weren't looking at it carefully, when the sudden appearance and growth of home sharing hit, they didn't have any mechanisms or any organizations within themselves really looking at that phenomenon when it hit and really developing coping mechanisms. So everybody's late. And so visitor management needs to be a concept that's talked about. And often when I talk about visitor management, I think people immediately think, oh, he must be talking about just limiting the number of visitors. No, I don't mean that at all. I mean better managing the visitors that you have now and continue growth patterns. But there are things a destination can do in management to avoid overcrowding at peak times of day, peak seasons of the year. And all too little is done on that because they don't have the skills to properly manage for visitors. And in many cases, the reason they don't have the skills is that because upper level decision makers don't even know that this is a body of thought that exists. Okay. So we need to raise that awareness. And I know probably for your magazine viewers, you'd like to talk also about what travelers can do. And they certainly have impacts that can help push destinations to do some of the right things, and I'd be happy to get into those discussions as well, of course.
Excellent, wonderful. Yeah, we will touch on that, and part of it is learning about the issues, and then figuring out if there's anything that can be done, that should be done, from our own abilities, and there's I think there's several things that we can do, and so we'll jump into that for sure.
Good.
And so I guess let's talk about some of those companies that you mentioned earlier that are on that sustainable journey and that are doing things really well, and they're moving toward being more sustainable. Could you describe some qualities that they have that we can look for?
Okay. I think, let's talk about tour operators. There are a lot of small tour operators that sell a more authentic product that might promote off the beaten path. And so just based on their product line, they would be tuned into these issues because they're trying to present product to their clients that doesn't just take them to the busiest places at the busiest time of day, that is trying to create authenticity. So they get these issues and it's built into their business model. So there's some wonderful case studies of how to market and how to develop product along those lines. Unfortunately, those are kind of typically small and regional companies.
Okay.
A couple of companies that come to mind where I've done a lot of work in Southeast Asia are Exo Travel and Kiri Travel, where both of them, by the way, have worked to get certified sustainable. And they have, but that's part of that is that built into their DNA is that they try to present product that is somewhat unique. Where we're struggling is larger companies that are selling to the mainstream mass market that don't have that sort of off the beaten path, that are just trying to sell more product to more people of the known places in the world, that there's not a great awareness that the mainstream stuff just has to behave and act more sustainably. One of the best cases of that, of a large company, is really one of the largest travel companies in the world, TUI Group, which is based in Europe but owns a lot of brands. And for full disclosure, I used to be the president of a few of their brands based in the United States.
Okay.
And I was with them when they decided to develop a very comprehensive sustainability set of policies, which was initially driven by European Union mandates for carbon emission reductions, which is regulation that the world needs more of, by the way. I wish the U.S. and China and others would take strong leads the way the EU has done in that. But TUI said to themselves internally, they said, okay, we have to work on carbon emissions reductions because of EU mandates, and we do so much business in Europe, and they own hotels, and they own cruise lines, and they own aviation. They have a lot of air carriers, or airlines. So they were among the first to purchase the Boeing 787 Dreamliner with its 20% decrease in fuel consumption and therefore carbon emissions. But they said to themselves, we have to reduce our carbon emissions to operate in the EU. Let's go in on sustainability all in, and let's learn about the full scope of activities, and let's get really genuine about this. So they're flawed just like anybody else, but the reason I'm talking about them is that they went all in, and they said, we're going to work on all the aspects of it. So I highly recommend looking at their annual sustainability reports, which are easily available online.
Okay.
And they're pretty candid about their progress, and that could serve as inspiration and guidelines for other travel companies. But also, the concerned traveler, could take a look at that and get a sense of, what are some of the issues, and what are some of the things I should be looking at when I do want to purchase travel. So that's a good case study of a comprehensive view of sustainability.
Great. Okay. Wonderful. Excellent. So, talking about cultural community tourism, that has definitely picked up in the last few years. We have, companies like Visit.org, who is working with local communities, local NGOs, who are, being able to implement travel in a way that benefits everyone involved, and travelers get this amazing experience that they wouldn't get elsewhere. And so I'm wondering if we could maybe speak to how to look for these community-based tours, and to make sure that there isn't any exploitation going on, and that all stakeholders are actually benefiting. And so what are some ways to make sure that we find those good tours?
Yeah, well, I did prior to coming to GSTC, I personally did some work on tourism development in developing countries, and worked heavily with CBT, with community-based tourism development. The challenge there is that those small enterprises just don't have access to digital online distribution channels. They not only don't have access, but they don't often have the skills to do the photography and the writing, the copy in English and other languages to reach the audiences. So they're really underserved. There's all sorts of wonderful little tucked away things in the world that nobody knows about because they don't have voice. The best way for most travelers to have access to those kind of cool things is careful selection of travel providers, tour operators that make an effort to sell authenticity and off the beaten path. I just mentioned a couple of companies in Southeast Asia, but companies that are more selling directly, and they're mostly inbound operators on a wholesale basis, but consumer-facing tour operators, a couple of brands come to mind: Intrepid Travel, G Adventures, where they have within product line itineraries, they try to weave in emerging destinations and unknown places and off the beaten path. And so there's product you could buy from a company like that, but also just cues for what kinds of things to look for if you want to travel independently. So this indexing of those small enterprises in CBT is a huge challenge. I was personally involved and also aware of many attempts to create global indexes of travel product. And it's not easy because of the difficulty of those enterprises, as I said, just building their profiles, but then someone putting the capital and the resources together to market those myriad small players. Online travel agencies have a bias that works against small enterprises, because if the online travel agency gets their commission, 15+% commission on a sale, they don't even want to list a $7 homestay because 15% of $7 isn't worth their time to add the profile. So the mainstream travel agencies, online travel agencies, just don't have an interest to pursue that. So there's been myriad attempts to have some NGOs and some social enterprises have attempted to create those kinds of indexes, but then they just don't have the marketing money to raise awareness to drive traffic to those sites. So that's the great tragedy. Travelers all around the world say, I want authenticity, I want off the beaten path, but they don't have distribution channels readily available for them to go find them.
Right.
So the conscious traveler really needs to dig, and that's a great frustration.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a frustration that I know turns a lot of people off. If they don't have time to do the research, and they just, they have 2 weeks coming up that they have off, and they just want to go, and so I know that's something we're trying to do at Immersion, is trying to make it a little bit easier for them, to at least give them some resources just to start with, and to go from there and make that research hopefully a little bit easier. But yeah, we have quite a road ahead of us to also help find these places and showcase them and let people know about them. And so lifetime journey hopefully ahead of us.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, hopefully we get some major philanthropist watching this discussion, and it helps us with the millions of dollars to drive traffic to such a site that would sell such product and make the world a better place.
That is the dream and the hope. And so I kind of want to get
Philanthropist is the word I meant to use. Sorry.
Oh. Excellent. So I want to get into the idea of greenwashing. I know some of us have come up against that, trying to find destinations and companies that are doing good things, but then we see maybe some certifications that we can't find anywhere online posted on their website, or we see some things that maybe make us think twice about booking with them. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about greenwashing, what it is, and how we sift through some of that.
Sure. Yeah, it's an important topic. I would say that fighting greenwashing is the reason that GSTC was created in 2007. So it's something that we've given a lot of thought to. I see greenwashing coming in two forms. One is a travel provider that does a few good things in sustainability, as I alluded to earlier. Mm-hmm. They don't do well in all things, but they put the couple of good things that they do in their marketing message, call themselves sustainable, and ignore the sins they're doing in another set of components of sustainability. So that's one form of greenwashing, is to the good things you're doing and ignore the bad. The other kind of greenwashing is really more blatant, of just not even really making attempts to be sustainable, but putting some labels, some keywords on your product and just trying to deceive people, because ecotourism may sound cool, but we don't really operate according to sustainable practices at all. So there's blatant greenwashing, and then there's less blatant, kind of selective messaging.
Okay.
So I think it's a real challenge to get around that. We've had a lot of discussions with OTAs, online travel agencies, the big players, asking them to put in the search results of hotels an icon showing that a hotel is certified. And they struggled because GSTC is relatively new, and we've been building the framework, and we're at a point in time now where we're really getting significant pickup of certifying bodies getting accredited by us, and you're going to see significant change in the next 2 years on that in terms of hotels that have been certified by a GSTC accredited. And so that's an important part of who we are and what we're doing, because certification comes in all stripes, and then certification is tremendously misunderstood. Certification to us means that a third-party, independent, neutral auditor physically went to a hotel or tour operator and verified through intensive observation and questioning, verification that practices and principles that are being claimed on paper in an application are indeed being put into practice. And that's what certification is. We've got a real problem with TripAdvisor's Green Leaders program that was launched in North America and Europe in the last few years, which is sometimes referred to as a new form of certification. And that's quite vexing to us because it's the opposite of certification, because in those indexes, the hotel can say anything they want to say about themselves. That's not third party, that's first party. Okay. That's like me saying I'm handsome and honest. That's an opinion. Certification is what's required on sustainability claims. And so we've asked green leaders at TripAdvisor to index and to educate their viewers on the difference between a hotel making their own claim versus independent external verification of that claim. And we wish they, as the global giant in disseminating information to travelers, would take those two steps of educating the visitor, the viewer, on the difference between unsubstantiated claims and verified claims, and providing a mechanism to help the traveler find truly certified sustainable product. There are sites, we like very much bookdifferent.com based in the Netherlands, which uses some filters on carbon footprints. And there's many other smaller sites, Bluebee, and a number of sites that are looking, developing that kind of product. I've seen so many attempts at this. And again, the challenge is, anybody can build a nice website. The challenge is, who has the money to do the marketing to drive people to that website? It's just the same point I made earlier on CBT, on small enterprises of off the beaten path, little lodges and community-based tourism projects and homestays and so forth. Enterprises and are underserved in the same way the highly sustainable product is underappreciated and not well presented to mainstream travelers. So even if you're looking for it, it's hard to find a comprehensive list of certified products. So we're building the list, and as we get more certifying bodies accredited, then the certificate holders they have, the hotels and tour operators they certified, will go into a list, and then we can get the attention of OTAs and others to make that information available to the consumer. Meanwhile, travelers can ask for it. They can start writing to TripAdvisor and writing critiques to point out that this is not an independent verification. If TripAdvisor and Expedia and Booking.com all heard from travelers to say, we want this, I'm telling you that would get their attention. They tell us people aren't really asking for us, asking for it. So an activist traveler needs to start asking for those things, and then maybe we'll get them.
Okay. And that it goes to show how much power the user has. And even if you aren't paying for TripAdvisor, if you're not paying for this service, they're still listening. And there's a lot of power that goes into asking questions and asking for things to be done in a way that is reasonable to you.
Absolutely. I'd like to ask viewers here who move beyond the towel policy at a hotel and saying that I can use my towel for a second day, which is a good thing you should do. But a more powerful thing is to start asking distribution channels to provide to you access of product that is certified sustainable. That would be more powerful.
Excellent. Excellent. And that kind of gets us into some things that travelers can do individually to start making a difference. And we've been talking about these, companies and tour providers who are, trying to do these things to move towards sustainability. What are some other things that travelers can do individually to help reduce that impact and help keep moving this movement in a forward direction?
Sure, good. The first thing and the most powerful is for them to just simply speak up. And during the booking process, make it known to travel providers, hotels, and transport and any kind of product or service that they need to buy to inform the providers that sustainability is important to them. And you want more information on their sustainability, and you want verification of that. So that's something that people just aren't doing that they should do. In terms of actual behavior, there's lots of great traveler tips, information online. There's some of them that I think just sort of get ignored, though, that don't get mentioned too much. One of my favorites is two of them are air conditioning usage is such a big user of energy. And, I often walk into a hotel room that's air conditioned far more upon my arrival than I'm not going to allow it to be as a green person during my stay. And that offends me. So my usage of that hotel created more carbon emissions on my behalf that I had no control over. So I complain about that because the hotel only hears from people complaining about the heat, and they don't hear from people that say, okay, I understand it's hot, and we need air conditioning, but you can manage the process a lot better. Don't turn the air conditioning high 5 hours before my arrival. So they need to hear those things. So that's one, is just sort of help moderate air conditioning usage because it's such a big suck on energy. Another is, when you wash your car, do you leave the water running the whole time? No, you turn the water on to rinse and you turn it off to lather. But we get in a shower and we leave the water running. So this is one thing that I would recommend to travelers is turn the water on to rinse and turn it off to lather. And there's lots of little things that we can all do, and be creative and think about these things. Think of impacts. Not only think about carbon emissions. Let's think about food waste, fair labor relations, treatment of staff, and so forth, and just really kind of be tuned into. I think one of our challenges in travel and tourism is that whether we're leisure travelers or traveling for business, we think of travel as sort of, okay, I'm breaking out of my routine for my day-to-day. I want a special experience, which is great, and that should happen. But I think we also kind of let our guard down and say, I just only want luxury, I only want convenience. And I think we just have to apply our values and our concern about the future of the planet a little bit more on some of these issues and behaving in a hotel a little bit closer to my behavior at home. Do I wash my towels and sheets every day when I'm home? No, I don't do that. But somehow I expect that in a hotel. Well, why do you expect that in a hotel? Well, it's habit. So my message is break those habits and think about those things and communicate that to the hotel because they need to hear from you that those are concerns.
Wow, excellent. Just taking steps to be a more savvy, smart traveler and to be aware of the impact that you do have just by, even running the sink when you're brushing your teeth. You don't need to be running the water the entire time you're brushing your teeth. Yes,
and you as a Californian, get that, but people from places with less shortages of water don't get that. But you need to be aware that when you do travel to an area that may have water shortages, if you live in a wet area, nobody ever talks about that, but you travel to an arid area, well, be sensitive and change your behavior for the location.
Exactly, and that is something that a lot of people take for granted or not they're not aware of. Sometimes when you travel, that location doesn't have water, and the people there are not used to using nearly as much as we use every day, and the water that you're using is taking away from them, and and so sometimes that's also something to be aware of, is what the resources are like in the places you're traveling to.
Absolutely. And what you just said upon touches upon it goes beyond the environmental element of saving precious fresh water, but it's a social issue, a social justice. There are many cases of rich world travelers going to a poor place in a dry climate where water is scarce, and there's some statistics in places of just outrageous ratios where the visitor is using 20 times the amount of fresh water as a resident. And so poor residents who have limited access to fresh water, their costs of getting fresh water go up, just so you can run a huge bath, and they just, based on their simple living, have added burden. So we need to raise awareness of these things. There's so many issues I've found in my years in travel, is that most travelers will respond well and behave better with awareness. But there's so little awareness of all these things. I tell destination managers around the world all the time, please give more strong codes of conduct of good behavior in your destination. Don't be timid. Most travelers want to behave properly. Most improper behavior comes from lack of thought and lack of awareness.
Right.
So if you have water shortages in your community, point it out, and you're going to get a lot of volunteer support from travelers just from awareness. So start there.
Absolutely.
But for the conscious traveler, the message here is try yourself to become more aware and more sensitized to the variety of issues that may be relevant in the places you visit.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for giving us so many takeaways and some things to think about, and especially as we move forward through this summit. It'll be a lot of things to keep in the back of our mind and to hopefully implement in our daily lives and also when we travel.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for being here, Randy, and I'm excited to see what's next for GSTC, and hopefully we'll all continue this journey.
Absolutely. My pleasure. It's good luck to you with what you're doing. I'm very excited about the summit, and I wish you all well and hope it is a big success.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.